Hello, my name is Michelle and welcome to my channel, Michelle's Melancholia. Today I'll be doing my November wrap-up. Yes, it is very late, but better late than never, I guess. Also, I am in this strange location. I've been traveling. I am visiting my family in Mexico City. That's where I am now, and this is what we're working with. So do bear with me. The sound may not be great, and also it's so bright and white. But anyways, let's just get started. In November, I mostly participated in the nostalgic November readathon, which was hosted by Kelsey from Slime and Slashers. And as always, I will have her channel linked below. And I didn't quite complete all of the prompts. I was only missing 2, which I think is pretty good. The book I used for the dolls or toys prompt was a short story, and that was The Viewmaster by Rebecca Rowland and Michael Aloisi. Because it's not technically a book, I'm not going to rank it in the month's reads. I'll just talk about it now a little bit. It was pretty good. It is, of course, about this 90s toy that we're probably all familiar with, and these siblings come across this toy when they are visiting their mom in her house, and when they start looking through the pictures, really creepy scenes start coming up. I really love the premise, obviously because it's a very short story. There wasn't a lot of explanation or resolution on what was going on with the toy. And I actually would have loved or would love to see these in a longer format, at least a novella. But I guess in general, it was a very enjoyable read. It was definitely very creepy. And I had fun with it, so that's that. Now for the books, as always, I will rank them in order from the one I liked the least to the one I liked the most, from my very own personal perspective. And actually, in November, I rated 2 books with 1 star, which is very rare. I don't tend to dislike books this much, but I guess I just had bad luck. Anyways, the worst book I read this month was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, but I do feel like I need to make a little disclaimer. And this is not me trying to appease the people who are very intense fans of Colleen Hoover, because I really thought it was a bad book. But first of all, it was a little bit my fault because for some reason I thought this was a thriller, and I don't know why I thought that, because there's like no evidence at all. If you read the book summary, it doesn't seem like a thriller at all. I think I just got confused with one of her other books, which was actually described as a thriller. I think the name for that one is Verity. So yeah, I think I just got confused. And I saw this one available through my local library as an audiobook, and I was like, okay, it's low effort to just listen to it, so I did. And it was bad. The other part of the disclaimer is that this book heavily features a storyline about domestic abuse, which I didn't know when I started reading the book. And when I was looking through the Goodreads reviews, because I'm nosy and I always like to read what other people thought of the books, I saw that many people who have gone through a similar experience found this book to be very cathartic, very relatable, and it had a huge impact on them. So obviously I am in no position to diminish their experience with this book. Now, all of that being said, I think my main issue with this book is that it seemed like 2 completely different books mashed together. So the first half of the book is very romance heavy. It is about this woman that has moved to a new city. I think she is starting her own business, enjoying her life, and she meets this guy who is obviously incredibly handsome. He is a neurosurgeon, but he just doesn't do relationships until, of course, he meets this girl, and then he becomes like obsessed with her. And at this point, I thought that this was just going to be like a really cheesy, really cringy romance, and I was like, okay, this is really not my kind of thing, but I'm just listening to it, so I might as well just continue and go along for the ride. But then the second half of the book rolls around, and then the domestic abuse storyline becomes more prominent, and then suddenly the tone of the book gets extremely serious, whereas the first half was almost goofy just because the romance was so ridiculous. So it was just very shocking to go from something like that to a very serious discussion. And I just feel that if the author had stuck to either one or the other, the book would have been salvageable. But this just weird mixture of tones and topics and everything just really didn't work for me. It was just very off-putting. So yeah, usually when I read a book from an author and it's my first time reading that author, I'm always open to giving them a second chance. But I don't think that's going to be the case for this one, because to begin with, I was never really interested in reading Colleen Hoover style of romance. I just got confused and thought this was something completely different. So this one is a little bit my fault. The other 1-star read was a bit disappointing, I'm not gonna lie, and that is Castaways by Brian Keene. And this is about a group of people who are contestants in a reality TV show, and it's a survivor style reality show. So they are kind of stranded in an island and they have to compete in survival games against each other to win prizes, and then in the end one of them wins money, etc, etc. But it turns out that they are not alone in this island. There is a colony of humanoid creatures, and it just has a lot of these tropey elements. This colony have no contact with the outside world, so they are kind of inbred. So many of them have become malformed, or well, the new babies that are born have different health issues, but also somehow they know that they need to increase their genetic variability, so somehow they are all also very horny for the humans, the human contestants. And as you can imagine, a lot of violence ensues, and violence of all kinds, the usual, like killing the humans in very gruesome ways, but also sexual violence against the women contestants. And the reason I hated this book is because honestly it just came across very misogynistic, and it was not about the sexual violence committed against the women itself, because I know that happens in more like extreme horror things like that. It was more about how the other characters reacted to these circumstances that made me feel that everyone just valued women so little. And I know this is like the characters and not the author, but it was just not enjoyable to read about. It didn't really add anything interesting to the story. I know for a fact that Brian Keene is not a misogynist, because for some reason I follow him on Twitter and I've always had the impression that he's a great guy. I also know that in particular in Castaways, he was really trying to emulate Richard Layman. It was kind of like his homage to Richard Layman's works, which I haven't read, but I know that they are very much in this vein. And I think that's fine, but what I personally would have liked to see in something like this is to maybe nitpick certain Layman-esque elements, but maybe give them like a fresh twist or a fresh take that wouldn't be so misogynistic. That's really the only word I can think of. I think it was a missed opportunity for him to bring in a different, new, better take on a Layman style story. However, Brian Keene, I am definitely giving a second chance. So if you have any recommendations of the ones you think I would like, please leave them below. I was thinking Gothic, is that the name? Urban Gothic, I think, which from what I understand is also pretty brutal and violent and all those things, but hopefully the perspective will not be so annoying to read about. There were no 2-star reads this month, so let's move on to the 3-star reads. And I think I need to clarify something here, because people sometimes act surprised that I gave certain books 3 stars. For me, 3 stars is a good rating. 3 stars is a book that I solidly enjoyed. I guess the point for me is that I don't think it will be super memorable, but I liked it. I have no complaints. So the first one is Secret Santa by Andrew Shaffer. And this is about a woman who, after some twists and turns, ends up as the head of a publishing company. And during the Christmas party, the people in the office gift her, or well, her Secret Santa during the Christmas party gifts her a very strange doll, kind of like a creepy doll. And after this happens, weird things start occurring in the office and people start getting hurt in very strange ways. And she starts to suspect that the doll may be involved with these misfortunes. And as I said, this was pretty good. The main character was very, very likable, and so were many of the other characters. I thought the story was well developed. Almost all of the mysterious things get explained, but not fully. So there's still a little bit of interpretation that the reader can do, but didn't let me feeling dissatisfied at all. I thought the ending was hilarious. And I would definitely recommend this as a holiday read. And actually, I think that I may even end up rereading it myself because it was just a lot of fun. Also, what I really liked about this one is that it's sort of like a supernatural slasher, but there's not really a lot of slashing going on. So it's not very gory or gruesome. So if you like slasher style stories where you're not sure who's in danger, who's going to be next, but without too much blood and gore and guts, I think you would enjoy this one a lot. The next 3-star read is The It Girl by Ruth Ware, and this is a thriller about two friends that go together to university, Oxford University, I believe. And one of them is just like your average girl next door, and the other one is this super popular, beautiful girl that everyone loves, the It Girl, obviously. And this It Girl ends up dead, and a man goes to jail for it. And now it's many years later, and her friend has reason to believe that maybe the wrong person was imprisoned for the murder. And I think this was just a solid thriller, which I was very happy about because my last Ruth Ware book I gave either 1 or 2 stars, but this was good. I think it had a really good balance of that thing I always mention, where the reveal makes sense. If you look back at the story, there were sufficient clues to indicate what happened, but I still got like a little bit surprised. The only thing that I didn't like is that maybe that last section between the reveal and the conclusion dragged on a little bit too long, and this happened in Ruth Ware's last book as well. So I think maybe it's like an issue with this author, but I mean, I was only bored for like 10 pages, something like that. It did also suffer a tiny bit from some things not being quite believable. Some of the characters' reactions or responses to certain things didn't make much sense, and it felt like they were just there to move to the next part of the plot or the next scene. But I think it was only one thing. So yeah, in general, it was very enjoyable, and if you like thrillers, I would recommend. Now moving on to 4-star reads. The first one is The Night Shift by Alex Finlay, which is also a thriller, but also I guess a bit more mystery, because it follows with a bit more detail the crime investigation. So to me, it read a little bit like a CSI episode. This one starts in 1999 with 4 teenage girls that are working the night shift in a video store, and someone comes into the store and kills all of them, or at least they think they did because one of them survives. And aside from this survivor, for all true crime fans, this is kind of reminiscent of the yogurt shop murder, so it's that kind of setting. And then 15 years later, 4 teenage girls that are working now at an ice cream shop are also attacked, and once again, only one of them survives. So of course, we follow the investigation, trying to find out if it was the same person who committed both crimes. And we follow 3 perspectives. One is the survivor from the original crime. The second one is a man who is now a lawyer, but he is the brother of the suspect of the original crime. So the suspect escaped and is now at large. So that's his brother. And the third perspective is just like an FBI agent trying to solve the crime. And I was pleasantly surprised with this one because I thought it was going to be just okay. But actually, I thought the writing was very good, like the way the story was structured. It had pretty good twists and turns, pretty good moments of misdirection where you think it's one person and then you're like, no, it's the other person. And you're suspicious of several of them. And once again, once the true criminal gets revealed, it all makes sense. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I think it was very cleverly done. And I've noticed that Alex Finlay has a couple more thrillers, so I would be quite interested in picking those up in the future. The next 4-star read is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jenette McCurdy, and this was my non-fiction pick for the month, and it is a memoir. Jenette McCurdy was a star in Disney Channel. I mean, I'm pretty sure most of you will be familiar with this book because it's everywhere. It's been everywhere and everyone is being loving it, and I loved it as well. It was just extremely interesting, first of all, to hear about all these behind the scene stories about Jenette and her roles in the TV shows. And of course, the focus is on her relationship with her mom, and her mom was very abusive to her emotionally and to some extent also physically. And I listened to the audiobook because Jenette narrates it herself, and you can definitely hear in her voice how cathartic an experience it was for her to put this down in writing and then to speak the words out loud. It was a very sad book to read or to listen to, but in the end it was also very hopeful, very empowering, and overall I just had a great experience reading it. My next 4-star read was My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. Yes, I finally read Stephen Graham Jones, and I actually body read this with a friend on Instagram. His name is Adam, and his account is Chaos of Cold, which I will also link below. And this book was awesome. I just feel like I'm not smart enough for it. And also, I just don't have the extensive cultural baggage required to understand the hundreds of references that are packed in this book. The ones that I did get were so cleverly referenced, so perfectly placed within the story that I really don't know how Stephen Graham Jones did this. In case any of you don't know, this is about a girl that lives in a very small town. She's kind of like the outcast at her school. She's the weird horror girl, and she's convinced that there is a slasher in her town, and that the slasher has already started killing people and that many more people will die. So she starts looking for the final girl who is fated to defeat the slasher. And this book really was a wild ride. For a long time, I had no idea what was going on. It's narrated from Jade's perspective, but she's quite unreliable, or at least you get the impression that she is. So I was just wondering, is this real? Is it not? Is she making this up? Is it really happening? And then things start happening, and happening really fast. There was a lot of action, mayhem, madness, everything was going on, and it was very entertaining. And by this point, I was already super attached to Jade, so I really wanted to see where the story was going to take her. I think the only reason I gave it 4 stars, one of them is my fault because I didn't understand all the references, but obviously that's not Stephen Graham Jones or the book's fault. It's literally my fault. But I think because it's a series, or at least I think it's going to be a trilogy, there was a lot of time spent on setting things up, which I think will pay off as the series continues, but I think it definitely reads like part of a series. So that's why I didn't fully give it 5 stars. I just felt like it wasn't finished off properly. But I think, again, this is a book that I will reread. I think I'm just going to read books 2 and 3 as they come out, and then I'm probably just going to binge read the whole trilogy. And I think it's one of those books that I will revisit even after a few years, maybe after I've watched some more slasher movies, especially the more obscure ones. People have made lists, including all the films referenced in the book, and there's like so many of them. So yeah, I would have to watch a lot of movies to fully understand what Stephen Graham Jones was going for. And finally, my 5-star read of November was My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. And it feels kind of weird saying I enjoyed this book, because I would actually say I suffered through this book. But it was just so amazingly well done that I had to give it 5 stars. And this is about a girl, Vanessa, who when she was 15, she engaged in a romantic and sexual relationship with her teacher, who was like 45 or something like that. But what was very unique about this book is that it focuses completely on Vanessa as a survivor. And the narrative is done in a dual timeline. It kind of feels like adult Vanessa reflecting on the experiences of 15-year-old Vanessa. And it is heart-wrenching because you can see her journey as she recontextualizes all of these experiences and begins to come to terms with the fact that this was not an epic romance, it was abuse. And obviously that is extremely difficult for her, and we just get to go along on her journey, which is pretty painful. But I just loved the focus on the experiences of the survivor, and again, I found it in the end to be extremely hopeful. And honestly, if I had a teenage daughter, I would want her to read this book. Okay, that is all. I have to run off now because we have some Christmas Eve activities planned for tonight, but I will see you on my next video. And until then, goodbye.